Before we begin, take a moment to like the video, subscribe if you haven't yet, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and when. It helps more than you think, and makes sure stories like this keep finding you. Now, let's begin.
(11:31 p.m. Unit C, ICU. The night air slid down my back like a cold breath through the cracked hallway window. I tightened my grip on the paper coffee cup. The overhead fluorescents buzzed, flickering just enough to keep me on edge. I hadn't slept in 30 hours. My eyes burned, and my scrub shirt clung to my skin with a damp chill that made me feel like I was still being watched. That scrub shirt, white, thin, a size too small around the chest, was regulation. But somehow, with him, it had always felt like an invitation. Even when I wore the standard undershirt, I caught him staring. When I stopped wearing it, just to breathe a little, his eyes stayed longer. His gaze was slow, methodical, and soft in that way predators make feel like praise. He never touched me in front of anyone, not once, but I still remember the weight of his palm on the small of my back, the way his fingers grazed the edge of my bra strap, the quiet click of the door closing behind me when he said, "Let's just go over your shift chart privately." No big deal. That was Dr. Dale Rourke. He died 1 year ago tonight. 11:34 p.m. I stood beside bed 4, checking vitals. Mr. Tully was unconscious, mouth slack, tubes humming quietly. The machines beeped, steady, almost too steady. I bent over the monitor, adjusting the IV line. That's when I felt it. A breath. Not mine. Warm. Close. On the back of my neck. I whipped around. Nothing. Just the hallway. Just the buzz of the lights. And then, click. My earpiece hissed. The intercom wasn't active. No one had buzzed in. No one was scheduled for rounds for another hour. But the static was there, faint, and under it, a voice. Familiar. Velvet. Too close. It said, "You always did smell like vanilla. Evelyn." I froze. The voice stopped. The earpiece fell silent. My chest tightened against the scrub top, tight enough to feel the rise and fall with every breath. I backed away from the bed and scanned the hallway. No one. Probably just cross-channel interference. I whispered to myself. Except this wasn't a walkie. This was a hospital-grade, encrypted line. And that voice, that tone, that name. Only one person ever said my name like that. And he'd been buried for 12 months. 11:43 p.m. I returned to the nurse's station. The glass at the front desk reflected me. Faintly dark brown hair, tied back in a messy knot. Pale face. Circles under the eyes. The white of my top pulled a little too tight across my chest. The chair creaked as I sat. I pulled up the ICU camera logs. Room 8. Doctor. Rourke's old office had been locked and sealed since his death. No access. No one in or out. But the feed was on. Not just on streaming live. I watched. Nothing. Just a dim, empty room. Then, a flicker. Movement. Not a person. A shape. A suggestion of something standing near the back wall. It moved. Fast. Almost out of frame. But just slow enough that I caught a glimpse of something I hadn't seen in a year. A white coat. A shoulder tilt.
And the gleam of his lightning head.
I slammed the monitor shut. Nope, I muttered, loud enough to hear myself and pretend I still had control. I downed the rest of my cold coffee, stood up, and turned toward the hallway. And there he was, not in front of me, not really, just the shape of him, a memory projected into shadow tall, broad, immaculately pressed shirt, and that crooked, knowing smile. It faded the moment I blinked, but the way my skin tightened across my collarbone told me something hadn't left. Midnight. I found myself walking toward room 8. I don't remember the steps, but suddenly, I was there, hand on the doorknob. The light inside was off, the window covered, but I knew what it looked like in there. Even after a year, especially after a year, the last time I was in that room, I had cried without making a sound, because he had looked at me like he was unwrapping a gift. Because when I said no, he only smiled and said, "You're allowed to say that, but I'm not required to listen." I never filed a report. There was no footage. There never was. He only ever cornered me in blind spots. And the one time I screamed, he simply said, "You'll ruin your career over a hand on your waist." Really, I told myself he would stop, that he didn't mean it, that I imagined it, but my body never forgot. As I stood outside room 8, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just listened. And from inside, behind the door, I heard the faint click of a rolling chair.
And the same voice.
Low and warm. "You look tired, Evelyn. Want to sit down?" The earpiece hissed again, and the lights above me flickered once, twice, then held. I backed away from the door, turned around, walked back down the hall, but the voice stayed with me. Thick, intimate, like a memory that refused to die.
And that was just the start.
That was before the photos started printing from the ICU machine, before the patients began speaking in voices that weren't their own, before I realized he wasn't haunting the hospital. He was still assigned to the night shift. 12:17 a.m. ICU break room. I shut the door, sat down on the cracked vinyl bench, and exhaled through clenched teeth. The plastic of my scrub top shifted slightly as I leaned back tight across my chest. Damp from sweat, pressing into me like a second skin. It wasn't always like this. I used to love this shift. The stillness, the hum of machines, the quiet rituals of keeping people alive in the dark. But now, every step I took in this hospital felt like walking across a glass floor, and every surface remembered how he looked at me. I first met Dr. Rourke during my second week at St. Augustine. He was tall, clean-cut, with that confidence only men get after being called brilliant too often. He wore expensive cologne, subtle and sharp. His voice was low and precise, and when I bent down to pick up a dropped chart, his gaze didn't flinch. He didn't hide it. He never did. "You're built like a cathedral, Evelyn," he once said. Something holy people go quiet for. I should have reported him right then. But when someone in power looks at you like that, like your body is the room and he's already inside, it's hard to breathe, let alone fight back. 12:29 a.m. My pager buzzed. Bed 2. A monitor error. I stepped into the patient room. It was dark, except for the green pulse on the monitor. I leaned over to fix the adhesive sensor, and just like before, I felt it, that heat, that gaze, not from the patient, not from the hallway, but from behind my back, just below the base of my neck. I stood frozen for a second. My chest rose sharply against the stretch of my top, pressing hard into the thin fabric. I could feel my own pulse behind my ribs. I turned slowly. Nobody. The door was closed. And yet, the sensor printer began to spit out paper from the wall-mounted machine, lines of unreadable data. Then, a still image. Grainy, black and white. It was me, bending over the bed, my scrub top pulled tight, my bra line barely visible, and in the corner of the frame just above my shoulder, a reflection, a man in a white coat. Watching, I dropped the printout and backed out of the room. I didn't scream. I didn't even run. I just walked straight back to the nurse's station, straight to the computer, straight into the incident reporting system. I clicked anonymous tip. I started typing. There's someone in room 2, possibly an intruder, or... I stopped. The mouse moved, not by me. The cursor hovered, then deleted the sentence, letter by letter. My hand was off the mouse, but the computer was deleting what I wrote as if someone else was watching. Then, a pop-up, not from the system, no window title, no icon, just text. No one ever believed you before. Evelyn, why start now? And beneath it, a blinking line, typing, scrub top still fits the same. 12:46 a.m. I tore off the headset and ripped the badge from my chest. I rushed to the staff lounge, hands shaking. Inside, I stood in front of the mirror. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me. I looked at myself, not just looked, inspected. The top was clinging to my chest, a slight dip in the neckline exposing the curve of my breasts. No wonder he looked. No wonder he stared. I yanked off the top and threw it onto the bench, grabbed a spare from the locker. Baggy, light blue, looser. But as I pulled it over my head, something slid out of the breast pocket. A note. My handwriting. But I never wrote it. You wore white when I died. I remember how it stretched. I stared into the mirror, jaw locked. I should have cried. I should have run. But what I felt wasn't fear. It was fury. Because for all his charm and poise, Dale Rourke never cared about who I was. He just liked how I looked when I was tired, vulnerable, and didn't say no loud enough. 1:06 a.m. I pulled the security feeds again. This time, I opened the archived footage from room 8. The night he died, I wasn't working that shift. I'd called out sick. I remember that clearly, but the video said otherwise. Time-stamped 1:28 a.m., March 7th, 24. The door opened. Someone walked in. A woman, dark hair tied back, white scrub top, full chest, slumped shoulders. Me. But I wasn't there. It wasn't just that I didn't remember. I was home that night. I had proof. GPS logs, clock-out times, text messages. But there I was on screen walking into his office. And then, the lights went out in the video. When they came back, he was gone. I was standing alone, facing the camera, scrub top wrinkled, hair pulled loose, smiling. 1:20 a.m. I shut the screen, locked the terminal, and sat back, hands trembling. The hospital was quiet again, too quiet. Somewhere, a printer hummed, then the overhead speaker crackled. No code blue, no medical alert. Just a whisper, his voice. You looked better in white. 1:32 a.m. Unit C hallway. The rest of the ICU felt like it had dropped a few degrees. The walls breathed colder. The lights buzzed lower, and my footsteps echoed even though the floor was padded. I passed bed 6, then 7, then stopped, because room 8 was open, not wide, just a few inches, but enough to see light spilling out onto the tiles. Soft, pale yellow, not the white-blue fluorescent we used. And there was movement inside, a slow shadow, back and forth, like someone pacing. That door had been locked since the night Dale died. Sealed. Tagged. It was supposed to stay closed. The key had been confiscated. The badge access revoked. No one was supposed to be in there. And yet, 1:34 a.m. I stepped closer. The air grew warmer, and the smell hit me. Cologne. The same wood and amber scent Dale wore. Sharp. Expensive. Impossible to forget. It poured through the crack in the door like heat off a body. It coated the inside of my mouth, made my stomach twist. I pressed my hand against the door frame. A voice whispered from inside. You always pause here. You always hesitate. I pulled back. My hands were cold. My chest was rising fast. My mind was shouting, walk away. Walk away now. But my body moved forward. The door creaked as I opened it, and there it was. Room 8, just like I remembered. Except not. The layout was the same old desk, rolling chair, metal cabinet, but the walls were different, covered in photographs, dozens, maybe hundreds, all of me. Most were from inside the hospital angles I didn't recognize, changing IVs, bending over gurneys, sitting in the break room. Some were from behind, close up, focused on the way my scrub top clung to my curves. One was a still frame from a security feed, me yawning, stretching, unaware that I was on camera. The neckline of my scrub shirt had slid just enough to expose the top curve of my breast. Taped underneath was a sticky note, his handwriting. You never know how stunning you look when you're tired. My throat dried. I turned slowly. More photos lined the cabinets. Others were pinned to a board with strings, like a map. My routines, my locker schedule, my shift rotations. And in the center of it all, one photo of me in the locker room, wrapped in a towel, caught mid-turn, eyes half closed. I had never seen that camera, had never known it existed. Below the photo was another sticky note, proof of ownership. 1:39 a.m. I staggered back, heart slamming. Then I heard it. The chair, behind me, rolling. I turned, but the room was empty. The chair sat still, and then the computer on the desk turned on. Old, flickering, a cursor blinking on a blank screen. Words began to appear. I told you not to change out of white. The blue hides you, but I remember the way it stretched, and I'll make sure it fits again. The screen went black. I backed toward the door, and it slammed shut. I screamed. I pounded on the door, twisted the handle. Nothing. Locked. The lights above flickered wildly. The air turned thick, humid, and suffocating. Then the speakers crackled. That same voice, calm, commanding, crawling into my ear like a warm hand behind my neck. We never finished that last shift. Evelyn, you owe me hours. You owe me. Silence. And behind me, the photo wall changed. The photos curled, shifted, morphed. Now they showed me, sitting on the hospital bed, scrubs gone, wearing a hospital gown, bare-legged, exposed, my face frozen in fear, and in every image he was behind me, smiling. 1:44 a.m. I collapsed against the door, hands shaking, and then just as suddenly as it closed, it opened. I spilled out into the hallway, gasping. Room 8 was empty again, dark, as if none of it had ever been real. I looked back, and there were no photos, no computer, just a dusty old desk and a broken chair. I was alone. Or, I thought I was, until I looked at the security camera above the door. Its little red light blinked twice, then stopped. 1:48 a.m. I made it back to the nurses' station. The screens were all dark, the monitors offline. The computers restarted themselves one by one. On the main terminal, a new folder had appeared. No title, no owner, just a timestamp. 1:44 a.m. I clicked it open. Inside, one video, no preview image, no metadata, just a title. Private shift, Evelyn Hart, MP4. I didn't click play. I deleted the file, then the folder, then I shut the system down. But I knew it wasn't over, because room 8 was unlocked now. And every night since, when I walk past it, it's cracked open. Just a little, enough to remind me he's still here, and he still knows exactly how I look when I'm tired. And when I forget to wear white. 1:59 a.m. I stood in the supply room longer than I needed to. The door was closed. The lights were off. And for a few stolen minutes, it was the only place in this hospital where I felt unseen. My breath fogged slightly in the dim air. My hands shook as I reached for the sterile gloves on the top shelf, white latex, smooth texture. They reminded me of his doctor. Rourke always wore size large. He'd make a point of stretching them slow, snapping the wristband with a smirk, then saying, I like when they're snug, like a second skin. And once, when he said that, he was looking at me, not my eyes, not my face. Me. I pulled the gloves on quickly and headed out. A routine check on bed 4. Mr. Tully, mid-50s, post-op liver transplant. He had been stable for hours, but his vitals pinged inconsistently. I chalked it up to interference, but the closer I got, the heavier the air became. The hum of the ICU faded behind me. Even my own footsteps felt dampened, muffled, like I was walking through someone else's dream. 2:03 a.m. I entered the room. Dim lights, no movement. Mr. Tully was asleep, mouth parted slightly, oxygen mask fogging. I stepped to his side, checking the monitor. BP steady, pulse slow. I reached for the central line, bent over slightly, right hand adjusting the tube, left hand on the rail. And then I felt it. Not imagined. Not a breeze. Not a muscle spasm. A hand. Large. Warm. Firm. It pressed gently on the small of my back, right where my scrub top lifted slightly when I leaned forward, right where he used to touch me. The pressure wasn't violent. It was worse than that. It was familiar, confident, possessive, like it had been there before. I snapped upright, spun around. No one. Just the beeping monitor. My chest heaved beneath my top. I placed a palm over it, trying to steady my breath. But I could still feel the imprint of his hand. The heat lingered. The shape, the slow slide of fingers moving slightly downward before pulling away. Just like before. Just like when he was alive. I checked the hallway. Empty. But I knew. Something had touched me. Not air. Not memory. Something with fingers.
And intent. 2:07 a.m.
I went back to the nurse's station, pulled up the security feed from the hallway just outside bed 4. The timestamp. 2:03 a.m. The video played back, showing me entering. Me standing over Mr. Tully, leaning down. And then the camera cut to static for exactly 11 seconds. When it resumed, I was facing the camera, wide-eyed, hand on my chest, breathing hard. The rest of the hall was empty, but in the far corner of the frozen frame, a shadow, too dark to make out, but tall, broad-shouldered, and facing me. I hit pause, zoomed in, tried to enhance the exposure. That's when the system froze. The screen blinked, and every single camera feed across the ICU suddenly displayed one frame. My back, zoomed in, high contrast, tight focus, the curve of my waist, the way the fabric of my top lifted slightly when I bent forward. Underneath, in red digital font, access granted. Then every screen went black. 2:14 a.m. I ran to the locker room, ripped the top off, put on a new one extra large. Baggy, shapeless. I stared into the mirror. Same hair, same face, same chest, rising and falling with panic. No matter how loose the shirt was, I still saw myself the way he had trained me to see me. Not as a person, but as a shape. And now he had access again. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. No caller ID. One text message. No words. Just a still image. The back of my scrub shirt, wrinkled, pulled tight. A handprint visible in the fabric. And underneath it, faint but legible, right where I left it. 2:20 a.m. I deleted the message. I shut off my phone. And I sat on the cold tile floor, hugging my knees to my chest. The hospital wasn't haunted by a ghost. It was haunted by a memory with access codes, by a man who had found ways to bypass death the same way he had bypassed consent. Quietly, carefully, and always in the blind spot. And now, he was back on shift. 2:31 a.m. The staff lounge smelled like burnt popcorn and bleach. I sat in the far corner, wrapped in a faded blanket someone had left on the couch, trying not to breathe too loudly. My hair clung to the back of my neck. My new scrub top baggy, boxy, genderless hung loose around my shoulders. Didn't matter. I still felt naked. Not because of skin, because of memory. Because he had trained me, trained all of us to feel exposed by what he noticed, not what he touched. I don't have to say it out loud to mean it. I see things other people don't. Evelyn, you carry tension in your chest. You should let that go. always with that calm voice, like he was doing me a favor, like he was helping, like he wasn't peeling me apart with his eyes. 2:39 a.m. I told someone. Nurse Jenna, 26, new grad, still had faith in people. She listened while I whispered about the hand, the shadow, the images on the screen, about the old room 8, the chair that rolled by itself, the scent of cologne that wasn't in circulation anymore. She gave me a long look. Not pity. Worse. Doubt. I mean, Evelyn, you're probably just exhausted. Right. You've been working doubles all week. Maybe it's not trauma. Maybe it's just burnout. I wanted to scream, to grab her by the collar and yell, would burnout leave a handprint on my back? But I didn't, because the minute I did, I'd be labeled. And when a pretty nurse loses her composure, people don't ask what happened. They just say, she's always been a little dramatic. 2:42 a.m. Jenna left to finish her charting. I sat alone in the lounge, staring at the vending machine. The screen glitched. Then a message appeared where the snack prices should have been. They don't believe you. But I always did. My legs stiffened. The machine clicked. The coil turned. A packet of white cheddar popcorn dropped into the tray without payment. I didn't touch it. I just stood and backed out of the room, because that had been my favorite snack. Because he used to bring it to me, unasked. 2:50 a.m. At the nurse's station, I opened my email. Maybe HR had something. Maybe someone had filed a report. Maybe somewhere in this building, proof still existed. But my inbox only had one message. No sender. No subject. Just a single embedded image. A photo of me. From behind. Leaning over bed 4. My shirt pulled tight. Again. But this time, the photo wasn't cropped. This time, it showed his face reflected faintly in the patient's heart monitor screen. Smiling, I shut the monitor, unplugged it from the wall, tore the LAN cable out with shaking hands. Then I walked, not to my patients, not to the med cabinet, but to the head nurse's office. 3:07 a.m. Deborah Miller, 53. Tough, sharp, no nonsense. She'd been in charge since the Clinton administration and had seen everything. Or so I thought. I told her everything. Voice low, tone steady, too steady, about the files, the photos, the text messages, the prints from machines that should have been offline, the sound of his voice in the speakers, the touch. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "Sweetheart, Dale Rourke's been dead a year. Whatever happened between you two, if there's a lawsuit, you should talk to legal." I clenched my fists. My chest ached beneath my top. I felt the weight of her eyes not on my face, but on my body, and I realized she knew. She always had. But Dale Rourke had never touched her. He had only touched me. And in a place like this, that made it my problem. 3:19 a.m. I went back to bed 4, stood still for a full minute. Mr. Tully was asleep, peaceful, but the monitor blinked red low oxygen alert. I reached over to adjust the mask. As I leaned down, I whispered, "If you're watching me right now, come out. Come out and show me." The lights flickered, the IV beeped, and somewhere, deep in the system, a printer began to hum. 3:31 a.m. I opened my locker slowly. The metal creaked, echoing in the quiet room like it was louder than it should have been. This was the furthest room from the ICU. No cameras, no patients, no oversight. It used to feel safe. Not anymore. I peeled off the loose scrub top and let it drop to the bench. The cold air hit my skin like ice water. My sports bra clung to me, soaked with sweat. I grabbed a towel, pressed it against my chest, and turned toward the mirror, and stopped, because tucked in the corner of the mirror's frame, barely visible in the reflection, a small black dot, a lens, a camera. It wasn't hospital issued. The model was different. Too small, too well hidden, no blinking red light. It had been there the whole time. My hands trembled. I stepped closer. Tiny letters etched around the lens. RZ44 night vision recording device. That wasn't ours. That wasn't installed by anyone still alive. I turned, scanning the locker room, and that's when I saw the others. Tiny pinholes in the ceiling tiles. A second camera above the shower head. Another above the entryway. There had to be at least 4, maybe more. And suddenly, I could see it. Every moment I'd ever had in here. Changing, stretching, wiping sweat from the middle of my chest, adjusting my bra, tugging down my top, all of it. Captured, cataloged, saved by a man who was supposed to be dead.
3:37 a.m.
I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just dressed fast, frantic, pulling on a hoodie over my scrubs, as if it might block his eyes. But when I turned back to my locker, there was a note inside, taped to the door. Old paper, familiar handwriting. His, "I never watched you like this when you were new. Evelyn, you blossomed later. After the tension built in your shoulders, after the chest filled out, after you stopped smiling." My heart nearly cracked through my ribs. I crushed the paper and threw it across the room, but it stuck to the mirror, somehow, like it belonged there. 3:42 a.m. I ran to the security office. Greg, the night tech, sat behind the monitors, eyes half shut, sipping coffee. "Greg," I said, breathless, "I need access to the locker room feeds." He looked confused. "There are no locker room feeds. HIPAA violations. You know that." I insisted. I begged. He sighed and toggled a few screens. Nothing. Just static. Blank frames. I told him I saw something. That someone had installed unauthorized devices. He scratched his beard and shrugged. "You're just seeing ghosts tonight. Rourke's anniversary, messing with your head." Huh. I looked him dead in the eye. "If I'm wrong, go check the locker room yourself." He didn't move, just laughed awkwardly and said, "You always were a little high-strung. Pretty, but intense." And just like that, I saw it. That same look Dale used to give me. The subtle lean, the prolonged glance, the smirk that said, "Don't overreact. You're prettier when you're quiet." It was everywhere. 3:49 a.m. Back in the ICU. My mind raced, but my body felt wrong. Heavy, electric, violated. Not by one man, but by every system that kept letting him in, every eye that looked and didn't speak, every woman who whispered that they knew but couldn't prove it, every file deleted, every camera feed that cut out right before it mattered. He was gone, but his gaze never left. I passed bed 2, paused. The monitor beeped rhythmically, and then Glitched. The screen lit up. Not vitals. Footage. From the locker room. Me. 5 minutes ago. Undressing. Bent slightly forward. A towel pressed against my chest. I lunged forward and yanked the power cord from the wall. The feed went dark. And then, a voice from the intercom. I liked this version of you better. More raw. Less guarded. Remember the night you wore the see-through white? You pretended not to know. But I knew you knew. My hands balled into fists. I faced the speaker. You're not real. The ICU lights flickered. All beds beeped in unison. Then, silence. And in that stillness, the whisper returned. You don't need to believe me. You just need to feel me. And in that moment, I did. A warm breath right behind my ear. And a pressure, not on my back, not on my shoulder, but on my chest. Palms, weight, as if someone were holding me. And squeezing. 3:58 a.m. I stood frozen in the hallway, not from fear, from rage. That touch, those fingers pressing against the curve of my chest. Slow and possessive wasn't physical. It didn't bruise my skin. It bruised everything else, because it was exactly how he used to do it. Not forcefully, not publicly, not enough to report, just enough to brand you. I ran to my locker again, hands shaking, fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I needed air. I needed something sharp. I needed to feel real again. But what I found instead was an envelope taped to the inside of the locker door, cream-colored, slightly aged, my name written in black ink. Evelyn, not Nurse Hart, not EVLN HRT like the ID system used. Just Evelyn, the way he used to say it, soft, slow, like a secret no one else should hear. I didn't want to open it. I already knew what would be inside. But my hands moved on their own. Inside, a photograph, not of me, of my bedroom, taken from outside the window. At night, curtains parted just enough to show me lying on my side, asleep. I knew the date, the blanket, the book I had left on the nightstand. That photo was taken 6 days ago. And beneath it, in neat handwriting, you sleep more peacefully when you're not pretending to be strong. You don't have to pretend with me. You were mine long before you ever knew it. 4:02 a.m. I dropped the photo and fell back against the locker. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not now. Not when I finally understood what this was. This wasn't a ghost story. This wasn't unfinished business. This was a claim. He wasn't haunting the ICU. He was stalking me from the other side. I left the locker room, not even sure where I was going. My badge buzzed uselessly when I tried to open room 8 again. Locked now, of course, but a new message had been etched into the glass window on the door. Not scratched, not taped, etched, as if burned by heat. Don't run. Evelyn. That was never part of the deal. 4:10 a.m. I pulled up the archived shift logs, typed in his ID.
Hierarchy.
Access denied. ID expired. Date of death, March 7th, 2024. But when I typed in mine, my shift record showed something I hadn't seen before. A linked profile. Shift overlap. E. Heart D. Rourke. Night ICU rotation assigned pair. Status. Active. It had been updated tonight. Something had reassigned me. To him, I checked the metadata. The last edit was made at 2:47 a.m., exactly 1 minute after I told Jenna. Exactly 1 minute after she said she didn't believe me. 4:16 a.m. I went to HR. The door was locked, lights off, but taped to the inside glass. A printed schedule. Monday night shift. ICU Ward C. Primary. Evelyn Hart. Mentor. Doctor. Dale Rourke. No one else. No backups. No assistants. Just me and a man buried 13 months ago. 4:20 a.m. My phone vibrated. Despite being shut off, I looked down. Screen still black, but buzzing. And then, all at once, it lit up. No unlock screen. No notifications. Just a video, already playing. Grainy, static-laced. The locker room, 30 minutes ago. Me changing, removing my scrub top, but from a new angle, one I hadn't seen before. Behind me, in the corner of the frame, just barely visible in the reflection of the mirror, his face, clear, still, smiling. And then he lifted one hand, held up 2 fingers, and traced a heart in the air. The video stopped. The screen went black again. And this time, the buzz was inside me, low, constant, like a hum beneath my bones. I backed into the hallway. The ICU lights dimmed. The intercom cracked, and his voice returned. This isn't possession. Evelyn, this is love. Real love doesn't need a body. It just needs a witness. And then, from the empty hallway, from every room, from the vents, I heard it. My name, over and over. Soft, tender, whispered by 100 mouths, all saying the same thing. Evelyn is his. 4:32 a.m. I stopped running. There was nowhere left to go. Every hallway circled back to itself. Every door I opened led me somewhere I'd already been. Like the hospital was looping, bending around me. Or maybe it was just him. Maybe Dale had bent the map the same way he once bent boundaries. Subtly, silently, until what was forbidden started to feel familiar. I was back outside room 8 again. The door was closed, but the light was on inside. Soft, warm, and this time, the lock panel blinked green. I stood still for a long time, long enough to wonder whether I was asleep, whether this was a nightmare caught between grief and guilt, whether I had invited him by remembering him too clearly, by letting the memory of his breath trail my skin one too many times. I raised my hand and opened the door. Room 8 was full, not of people, of presence. The air pressed down on me, thick, humid, like walking into a motel room that hadn't been opened in years, except the room was spotless. No dust, no old smell, just that same woodsy cologne, curling through the vents like a voice. The lights glowed gold. The desk had been cleaned. On it, a red file folder and a single pair of gloves. Not mine. His, size large, stretched tight at the fingers, worn smooth at the palms. I didn't touch them. Instead, I looked at the walls. The photographs were back. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, but not printed from security footage. These were intimate, my face up close, my hands holding a coffee cup, my lips parted mid-sentence. The curve of my shoulder under the scrub collar, One photo showed me asleep in the break room, head tilted, neckline loose. Another me bent down to pick up a chart, my chest pressed tight beneath my top, the image catching just enough shadow to suggest more than it showed, and under each picture, a handwritten caption. Tuesday, lavender shampoo, post-crying, gorgeous. You didn't notice the camera, but I did. At the center of the wall was a photo larger than the rest. Me, in the hallway outside room 8. From this morning. He'd printed it tonight. I was in profile, my scrub top slightly sheer from sweat, my expression blank, tired, unaware I was being watched. And above it, etched in marker, "You're back. I'm ready." I turned to leave. The door clicked shut behind me. I didn't move, didn't scream, just stared at the only other thing in the room, the bed. It hadn't been there before, but now it sat in the corner, folded sheets, medical-grade mattress, restraints clipped at the sides. A piece of paper rested on the pillow. One word, yours. 4:41 a.m. I sat down, not because I believed any of this, but because my knees wouldn't hold anymore. And when I sat, the lights dimmed. Soft jazz began playing through the wall speaker, Dale's favorite playlist. I recognized the opening chords. "You danced once." He had told me during a slow night shift. "I saw you in the break room." That's when I knew. Knew what? That I was his, that I moved well enough to follow his lead, that my body, caught in a moment of vulnerability, had somehow given consent. The computer on the desk flickered on. A folder auto-opened. Inside, video files, each labeled with a date, each a night I'd worked alone. I clicked one. There I was, in room 8, walking, sitting, changing, no awareness of being watched, but not alone. Because in every video, there was him, just behind the camera, breathing. I could hear it, low, raspy, close to the mic, breathing with me. I slammed the monitor off, stumbled back, looked at the bed again. The sheet was turned down now, but I hadn't touched it. And the gloves on the desk, gone. My earpiece clicked on. No static, just his voice. "You've always belonged here, Evelyn, in this room, with me." The air turned warm, then hot. Sweat beaded at the base of my spine, ran down between my breasts. The scrub top clung to my body again, like a second skin. And suddenly, I couldn't tell if I was wearing the uniform or if it was wearing me. I stood, reached for the door. It didn't open. He didn't stop me physically, just whispered again, "I didn't force you in. You came back? You opened the door. You sat on the bed. You let me in. You let me in, Evelyn." And then the lights went black. 4:52 a.m. Total blackout. The room was a void, lightless, airless, soundless. Except for his breath, it filled the space, not from the speakers, not from the vents, from behind me, low, measured, familiar. That exact rhythm I used to hear when he stood too close at the nurse's station, when his hand would hover near my lower back, close enough to feel, never close enough to prove. The voice followed. "Back then, you used to pretend you didn't feel it. Now you don't have to pretend anymore." I clenched my eyes shut, but that only made it worse. Because in the dark, my memory took over. His eyes, the way they never blinked when he watched me. The slow up and down that wasn't hunger, but calculation. 4:55 a.m. The lights flicked back on dim, golden, flickering like candlelight. I stood in the middle of room 8, but I wasn't alone. Every patient monitor across the ICU had been wheeled in, bedside screens, heart rate beeps, ventilators, all unplugged from the real patients, all glowing, all active, all facing me, and every screen showed the same thing. Me, on the bed in room 8, sleeping, vulnerable, breathing slow, from an angle I had never seen before, above, like he had placed a camera in the ceiling just to watch. "You made the room look like this," I said aloud. "You arranged it. You staged everything." Silence. Then a breath behind my ear. "No, Evelyn, you did. You walked back in. You looked at the pictures. You sat down. The screens flashed. Now they showed me tonight. At each moment I had been alone, changing, crying, scrubbing blood off my hands in the trauma sink. Every shot framed like a portrait, as if my suffering had been curated, archived, studied, and in the corner of each image, a single file name, HRT 447 Evelyn Final Shift, MP 4:59 a.m. The intercom came on again, but not with his voice. This time, it was mine. Patient stable. IV drip set. Monitor clear. "Doctor, Rourke, do you want me to—" Cut. Another clip. "No. Please don't touch me." Cut. I didn't say yes. Cut. "I just want to go." Cut. Each line stripped of context, strung together like dialogue in a film he had edited for years, like he had been building a script of me, of us, of this. 5:03 a.m. I covered my ears. Every screen now showed the bed in real time, still empty, still waiting, until I blinked.
And I was in it.
Not standing, not watching, lying in the bed, facing the ceiling, eyes closed, chest rising and falling beneath my white scrub top. But I was still standing too, two versions, both real, both me. The lights dimmed further. He whispered again. "You said no out loud, but your body never did." That's the version I kept. I stared at the bed, and the other me opened her eyes, looked straight at the camera, straight at me, and mouthed, "Finish our shift." 5:07 a.m. The monitors began to beep, syncing together, like a countdown. The lights pulsed in time, my ears filled with static. The door to room 8 blew open, windless, forceful, outside the room. No hospital, just blackness, like he'd erased the rest of the world. The bed shifted. The other version of me sat up, spoke aloud, in his voice. Time of death. Evelyn Hart. 5:08 a.m. Method. Compliance. I ran, out of room 8, down the hallway, past the flickering lights, past the nurse's station now empty, past the patients now silent. The entire hospital was still, like it had shut down for the show to finish. And I had been the show. 5:11 a.m. The exit door loomed ahead. I slammed into it. Locked. Of course. And on the small rectangular window, written in the fog of my own breath, "Don't clock out early." 5:17 a.m. I don't know how long I stood at that locked exit. The emergency lights above blinked, but no one came. The doors didn't open. Every part of the hospital felt like it was holding its breath, waiting. And so was I, waiting for the shift to end, waiting for someone to relieve me, waiting to wake up. But no one came. No one ever came. The earpiece crackled again. I ripped it out and threw it. But the voice didn't stop. The thing about night shifts, Evelyn, they never really end. Not for people like us. 5:22 a.m. I walked back toward the ICU. It didn't feel like surrender. It felt like necessity. Everything was wrong here. But it was wrong in a pattern. And sometimes, the only way to escape a pattern is to walk through the center of it. The nurses' station lights were off, the screens dark, but on the desk sat a new printed schedule. One sheet, fresh ink. ICU night staff, March 7th. Primary, Evelyn Hart. Attending, Dr. Dale Rourke. Status, active. My name. His name? Together. Still. I flipped the page over. On the back, scribbled in the same familiar handwriting, "Welcome to your permanent rotation. We'll take great care of you here." 5:26 a.m. I turned back toward the patients. Every bed was full. Each occupant stared forward, eyes open, unblinking, and in their pupils, reflections, not of the ceiling, of room 8, over and over. That room burned into their vision, as if Dale had planted it in the back of every eye. And then, one by one, they began to whisper, "Finish our shift. You belong here." He's still on the floor. Their voices layered, stacking, folding into each other, a chorus of consent that never belonged to them. 5:29 a.m. I ran to the administrator's office. I don't know why. Maybe to check the files. Maybe to pull my name from the schedule. Maybe to scream. But when I opened the door, the office was already occupied.
By me. Or the other me.
The one from the monitor. The one that had laid down on the bed. She looked up, smiled softly, and slid a form across the table. Employee transfer request. Signed. Dated. Not in my handwriting. Printed clearly at the bottom. Transfer to Night ICU, Room 8 Permanent. Supervising Physician, Rourke. D. 5:31 a.m. I stepped back into the hallway. The door to Room 8 was open again. Inside. Clean. Warm. Lit. The bed made. A nameplate had been installed on the wall. Dale Rourke, ICU attending. Evening specialist, Room 8. As if he had never left. As if he had just gone for coffee. And now, he was back. And so was I. 5:35 a.m. I turned around, left the room, headed back to the front lobby. This time, the exit doors opened. The sky outside was dark blue, the hint of sunrise somewhere beyond the hill. For a second, I believed I had made it, that I'd escaped, that the hospital had given me back. But then, the lobby phone rang. I froze. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then silence. Then, voicemail playback began on speaker, a voice I hadn't heard in a year. The head of scheduling. "Hey, Evelyn, just confirming you're still paired with Dr. Rourke for night ICU rotation, per the auto-renewal policy. If not, get that transfer form in before morning, otherwise the system logs it permanent. Anyway, thanks again. You two always made a great team. Click. 5:41 a.m. I walked back inside. Didn't even hesitate. I didn't bother going to the nurse's station. I went straight to room 8, sat down at the desk. The computer turned on. My badge lit green. The schedule blinked on screen. Hart Rourke, Unit C, full access granted. And in the reflection of the monitor, standing behind me, him, not shadow, not memory, just Dale, smiling, calm, as if no time had passed, as if I'd never left, and I didn't turn around, because that's how you end a shift in this place. You don't clock out. You just stop resisting. You sit down. You breathe in the old air. You listen for the buzz of his voice in your ear. And you let the hospital close around you, like a pair of warm gloves, stretched tight, fitted perfectly, forever. ICU administration note. Staffing anomaly reported in Unit C. Nurse Hart marked as present, but no in-out badge swipes recorded. Doctor, Rourke reappeared on internal roster despite being deceased, confirmed March 7th. 24. Recommendation. Audit Room 8. Note. Access. Unavailable badge system. Loops. Authorization. Indefinitely.